beloved mother disappeared a few days after her birthday. The family was certain that she could not simply disappear like that. However, her disappearance led to the uncovering of the darkest family secrets. South of Fayetteville, North Carolina, lies the small and cozy town of Hope Mills. In the year 1987, Edward Dean Williams and her second husband rejoiced over the birth of their daughter, Tabitha. 2 years later, their second daughter, Anne, was born. Edward Dean also had a son, Terry, whom she brought into the world in her first brief and difficult marriage. After the divorce, Terry's father disappeared from their lives. Terry grew up smart and strong, and his sisters admired him. For them, he was always a role model. Edward Dean always put her children first and was ready to do anything for them. She taught them to pursue their goals and to be independent. Although she was proud of all her children, she often emphasized Terry's successes. Edward Dean had a wonderful relationship with her older brother Robert, who was a very reserved and quiet person. Robert was always ready to look after the children and support his sister in difficult moments. Edward Dean's second marriage was not of long duration, and after the divorce she decided not to enter into relationships anymore. But the meeting with Michael Williams changed everything. Edward Dean met Michael through her brother Robert, with whom Michael served together in the army. Michael was kind and patient, and after 2 failed marriages, he became the best man in her life. Edward Dean and Michael married on the 6th of August 1999. After they married, Edward Dean's children did not immediately accept Michael. With time, however, he was able to win their trust and affection. This marriage was very happy. Michael was always ready to help, cared for the children, and never refused them anything. He was completely different from the men Edward Dean had been with before. With Michael, she felt safe. Michael provided for the family alone, and Edward Dean no longer had to work 3 jobs simultaneously as before. She smiled constantly and was very happy with Michael. A few years later, Anne and Tabitha graduated from high school. Terry entered the Naval Academy, and the whole family rejoiced over his decision. They believed that a brilliant future awaited him. In March 2010, Edward Dean received sad news. Her beloved husband Michael was diagnosed with a serious illness. Michael's illness shook everyone. In a short time, he transformed from a strong, healthy man into a completely helpless person. After saying goodbye to him, it was very difficult for Edward Dean. Finally, she had found a man who loved her and her children and cared for them. And now she had lost him. A year later, the first anniversary of Michael's loss approached. Edward Dean found it hard to hold on. She looked very lonely and depressed. Her relatives had the feeling that she simply wanted to talk with someone to fill the emptiness within her. Fortunately, her son Terry suggested living with her for a while so that she would not be alone. The daughters and Edward Dean herself were pleased with this suggestion. But as it turned out, this happiness for Edward Dean's children did not last long. On the 1st of December 2011, the oldest daughter of Edward Dean Williams, as she was hanging laundry outside, suddenly heard the ringing of a mobile phone. Her uncle Robert called and asked if she had been in contact with her mother, as she was not answering his calls. Tabitha immediately called her younger sister Anne. Anne suspected that the mother might have gone away to be alone, but Tabitha noted that the mother always gave notice when she went away. Thereupon, they decided that Robert should report the disappearance to the police. On the 4th of December 2011, a patrol officer noticed an abandoned car on the roadside. After checking the license plates, he determined that the car belonged to Edward Dean Williams. The car was located 5 kilometers from her house, but Edward Dean herself was nowhere to be found. The patrol officer called investigators to the scene. The car was not locked, and on the dashboard lay a phone with an open message from Brother Robert. If you read this, definitely call. We are worried. 30 meters away from the car, the investigators found Edward Dean's handbag tied to a tree. In it were her driver's license, a checkbook, and more than $3,000 in cash. The police also determined that the car key was missing. Obviously, the person who was behind the wheel had taken the key. Robert, Edward Dean's brother, was called to the car's discovery site. The investigators noticed his numerous calls and messages, which gave the impression that he suspected something. Robert reported that Edward Dean had not been responding to his calls for about a week and he did not know where she could be. However, he had not filed a missing person report, which seemed strange to the police. Robert also told them that Edward Dean lived nearby together with her son Terry, who might know where she is. After the case of Edward Dean Williams' disappearance was opened, the investigators called Terry for questioning to find out his mother's possible whereabouts. Terry said he had last seen his mother about a week ago. She mentioned that she would drive out of town for a day or two, but she did not say where exactly. Terry was not worried, as she was often away from home for weeks. When the investigators spoke with Robert, he shared disturbing information. Robert told them that his sister had lost her husband a year ago and still had not gotten over this loss. Perhaps she could not cope with the loss and was planning something bad. The investigators decided to pursue this theory and contacted Edward Dean's daughters to learn more about her condition. The younger daughter, Anne, was called for questioning. She said that her mother sometimes called crying, and friends also confirmed that Edward Dean could call in the middle of the night and cry. The older daughter, Tabitha, was also called for questioning. Tabitha immediately rejected the assumption that her mother could be planning something bad. She lived nearby and saw her mother often. Tabitha said that her mother was very much looking forward to her graduation and could not simply disappear like that. If Edward Dean planned to go away briefly, she would have definitely told her daughter this. From the beginning, the investigators suspected Robert, Edward Dean's brother. They asked Tabitha if her uncle could have anything to do with her mother's disappearance, but she firmly rejected this possibility. Robert was in daily contact with his sister, and when she stopped responding to his messages and calls, he hesitated to file a missing person report. The investigators wondered why he did not go to the police immediately when she was no longer reachable. While the police investigated, Edward Dean's family asked local residents for help. Anne and Tabitha appeared on local news programs, hoping for support in the search. Tabitha believed until the end that her mother would be found and could come to her graduation ball on the 11th of December 2011, 2 weeks after Edward Dean Williams' disappearance. The police received a tip about unknown evidence found at an illegal dump site on the city outskirts. It turned out to be the missing Edward Dean Williams. The dump site was located about 1 kilometer from her house, and her clothing was dirty. The investigators informed the family about the discovery. The daughters took the news hard and initially did not want to believe what had happened. When the missing person case transitioned into a criminal investigation, an investigator from the Serious Crimes Department joined the investigation. The first thing they did was to question Edward Dean's brother, Robert, again. They took a DNA sample from him, but the investigations confirmed his innocence. During the questioning, Robert explained how a large amount of cash ended up in Edward Dean's handbag. He last saw his sister on the 27th of November when he helped her at a flea market. The $3,000 found in the handbag were proceeds from the sale of items. The investigators checked all traces and protocols that were created before the discovery of the evidence. It turned out that Edward Dean's car keys had disappeared and no one knew where they could be. During one of the questionings, the investigator asked Tabitha how her mother's keys looked. Tabitha remembered that the key hung on a pendant in the shape of a star with the figure Betty Boop. She also provided a family video on which these keys could be seen. The police were certain that they could find the perpetrator if they discovered the car keys. Meanwhile, the investigator examined the protocol of the interrogation of Edward Dean's son Terry to understand how she had spent her last days. Terry told that his mother took a small trip about 2 to 3 weeks before her birthday. On Saturday, the 27th of November, a week before the car was found, he accidentally heard her phone conversation. Edward Dean said, "I miss you. I can come there, and we see each other." Terry suspected that she was speaking with a man with whom she possibly had a romantic relationship. He added that he had never seen this man but had heard several times how his mother spoke with him. From his statements, it emerged that Edward Dean possibly had a new romantic relationship that she kept secret. After these statements, the investigators began to examine her private life to find out with whom she met and what relationships she had. During the investigation, the investigator learned of an unusual passion of Edward Dean's that could lead to new suspects. She loved driving trucks, often took her dog with her, and simply enjoyed the ride. The investigators determined that she had met a truck driver named Wayne Black some years ago. Although she was married to Michael at that time, Edward Dean and Wayne became close friends. Their children disapproved of this friendship, as they found it strange that their mother found new friends while her husband Michael was at work. Nevertheless, Edward Dean's daughters turned to Wayne Black for help when their mother disappeared. However, Black said that he had no contact with Edward Dean and would not help with the search, which seemed strange to the daughters. They considered him their mother's best friend and suspected that more connected them. The investigators suspected that romantic relationships might exist between Wayne Black and Edward Dean and invited him for questioning to find out when and where they last had contact. Investigators were surprised by Wayne's confession during the interrogation. He reported that he had seen Edward Dean on the night before her disappearance. They were together at a concert in the city Florence, South Carolina. After the concert, Edward Dean returned home. Around 1 o'clock at night, she called Wayne Beck and said that she was at home and resting in bed with her dogs. She thanked him for the beautiful evening and said that she had not felt so good in a long time. Then they said goodbye. Wayne told the investigators that he had driven away after the concert because of business and had not returned to North Carolina. He presented his logbook, GPS coordinates, and movement data. The investigations revealed no evidence of a romantic relationship between Wayne Beck and Edward Dean, only friendly. Wayne Beck was removed from the list of suspects. He also pointed the police to a new possible suspect, Edward Dean's second husband and father of her 2 daughters, Anne and Tabitha. Edward Dean's second marriage was difficult. Her husband was authoritarian and believed that everyone should obey him. Constant arguments and conflicts characterized their family life, which affected the upbringing of the children. He was particularly annoyed by Edward Dean's son, Terry, whom he considered a ruffian and wanted to raise according to his own ideas. He did not want Terry to live with them and spoke about it with Edward Dean every day. She tried to mediate between them and apologized to her son. After every conflict, Terry asked his mother to leave her husband, but she stayed every time. Edward Dean believed that she could change the man for the better, but finally their marriage ended in divorce when the girls were still small. After moving to another city and a new marriage, Edward Dean still felt guilty toward Terry. The investigator decided to find out whether Williams's ex-husband could be involved in the incident. But the investigation revealed that the second husband could not be guilty. He was always at work, and his whereabouts were known. He had a watertight alibi. The police continued working on the case for several weeks. A month passed, but there was no progress. In January 2012, the police received a new tip. Edward Dean was working on her dissertation at the local college, and her supervisor reported a disturbing conversation they had shortly before her disappearance. It turned out that Edward Dean was worried that her son would move into her house. The investigators wanted to find out why she was so worried about her son's return. The police questioned people close to Terry, including his ex-wife Tara Kennedy. Tara told that her family life with Terry was very problematic. She noticed his jealousy and aggression when she spoke with other men. Tara believed that problems in the relationships with his mother and stepfather influenced Terry and made him violent. The police returned to search Edward Dean Williams' house. When they arrived, the investigators saw that Terry was burning things in the backyard. He had also destroyed important documents and items that had to do with Michael Williams. This aroused suspicion with the police. Terry did not like Michael and was trying to get rid of his things. During the search in the house, the investigators found keys to Williams's car. They could only be there if he had brought them himself. Terry was arrested but refused to cooperate with the investigators and remained silent. The police suspected that on the 28th of November, a conflict occurred between Williams and Terry that led to the tragedy. Terry then decided to eliminate the evidence, got into the car and drove it 5 kilometers away from the house to mislead the investigators. Terry's sisters, Anne and Tabitha, were shocked by his deed. In court, Terry denied his guilt and claimed that one of his mother's admirers was guilty. On the 23rd of November 2015, on the day Edward Dean would have turned 54 years old, the jury found Terry guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment. The relatives of Edward Dean Williams still cannot believe that their son Terry, who seemed so sweet, could do such a thing. At the periphery of a large city where a loud highway connects the center with the suburbs, a mysterious event occurs. Medical personnel carrying out their duties notice something unusual at the exit of the 476th highway. There stands a car as if it was abandoned in haste. The engine is running, the headlights are shining, the radio is playing. The driver's door is open, but inside there is no one. This scene alarms random witnesses, and soon the police arrive. While they examine the crime scene, they discover some disturbing details. In front of the car on the asphalt there is a not yet dried spot of unknown origin. Nearby lies a stone with the same traces. Similar traces are also found on the fence next to the car. The specialist for analyzing such scenes, Dale Yeager, suspects that the owner of the car encountered sudden difficulties. In his opinion, everything happened very quickly. Someone attacked the driver unexpectedly and then quickly disappeared with him. Furthermore, the investigators discover and photograph a tire print next to the car. This trace could become an important piece of evidence in the investigation. The evidence specialist makes a copy of an important detail that is sent to the regional laboratory for further examination. The vehicle is registered to Gail Willard, but on this night it was driven by her daughter, 22-year-old Amy Willard, a promising athlete from George Mason University in Virginia. Amy was visiting her family who lived near where the vehicle was found. Amy told her mother that she wanted to visit an establishment called Smoky Joe. According to a friend, Amy left the bar alone around 1:30 in the night. Gail Willard, her mother, noticed that her daughter had never been to Smoky Joe before and during her visits home rarely went out, preferring to spend time with family. The condition of the vehicle makes the investigators think of a possible incident on the road. While Gail Willard inspects the car, she notices new damage to the rear bumper that was not present before Amy's trip. The woman immediately reports this to the police. It is suspected that there was a collision with another vehicle at the intersection where Amy wanted to turn from the 476th onto the 1st Street. According to this version, Amy could have stopped at the roadside to exchange information, after which this mysterious situation occurred. The next morning, about 1 kilometer from where the car was found, clothing and shoes are discovered. The police officers immediately bring the finds to Amy's mother for identification, and the woman confirms that the items belong to her daughter. What is amazing is that there are no dirt traces on the found clothing. It is completely dry, as are the shoes. This appears strange to the law enforcement agencies given the recent rain. It is suspected that these items were only placed after the vehicle was found. This suggests that someone might have returned to the crime scene to eliminate evidence. The investigators carefully examine the recordings from surveillance cameras in shops and ATMs near the bar, Smoky Joe, but Amy does not appear on any of them. And then an unexpected clue falls into the hands of the law enforcement agencies. Amy Willard's car is found abandoned at a highway exit in a small settlement. After Amy Willard breaks off contact, the police ask the public for help. One of those who come forward is 23-year-old Andrew Buck. He reports that he was traveling on Highway 476 that night and noticed something suspicious near her car. The police were familiar with Buck because some years earlier he was accused of impersonating a representative of the law. According to witnesses, Buck turned on the siren signal, ordered the driver to stop, and then showed identification. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked those he stopped. But on one of these days, one of the drivers reported him to the police, but the matter never came to court. Buck immediately draws the investigators' attention, as they suspect he might have used a similar approach with Amy Willard as well. According to Patrick Penn, a representative of the U.S. Attorney's Office, returning to the crime scene is often typical for persons who commit unlawful acts. This could be related to curiosity or other motives, since criminals often return to important locations to better understand the situation. In Amy Willard's case, events develop quickly. Less than 1 day after her disappearance, playing children make a disturbing discovery in an abandoned parking lot in North Philadelphia. They find the figure of a woman lying in the grass. Amy's parents recognize her by the characteristic tattoo on her ankle. Gail Willard, Amy's mother, shares her feelings. She describes the day of uncertainty as the hardest. When the news about the find in Philadelphia comes, Gail strangely feels relief. Now the investigators have the opportunity to clarify what happened. No one could bring her back to life, but at least she was now nearby, says Gail. The medical examination reveals details about Amy's condition. The girl, 1.58 meters tall and 54 kilograms heavy, died according to experts' assessment around 7 o'clock in the morning, about 5 hours after her disappearance. The cause is multiple injuries to the head area. Initially, the investigators suspect that this might have been a crime of passion or a situation between known persons. They also do not exclude that someone followed Amy and then tried to confuse the investigation by leaving traces at another location. The investigation reveals a motive, and they find DNA samples of the perpetrator during the investigations. The DNA samples are sent for analysis. Essentially, the investigators have a genetic trace, and now they must determine its origin. The medical expert also points to an unusual pattern on Amy's upper body half, whose nature remains unclear to the investigators. At the same time, crime technicians examine the tire traces found at the crime scene. They belong to 13-inch Firestone 440 tires that are normally mounted on small compact cars. The case with Andrew Buck's car brings no results. The tires do not match, and the search of his house yields nothing. Andrew Buck is officially excluded from the list of suspected persons after the comparison of biological samples. Due to the lack of further clues, the investigation stalls. 1 year after the tragic incident with Amy Willard, there is a new case. 19-year-old Patty Jordan reports strange behavior from a driver on the road. According to her, an unknown person followed her after she left a nightclub. When she stopped at a traffic light, someone drove into her car. In shock, Patty drove on without looking. The unknown person tried to get her to pull over to the side of the road, eventually overtook her, and Patty was able to remember the license plate of his car. It turns out that the car belongs to 38-year-old Arthur Omar, who registered it 20 years ago. In 1978, he was convicted in Nevada of a serious crime and received life imprisonment. Surprisingly, he was released early after only 11 years. Dale, a specialist in criminal analysis, expresses his incomprehension about the parole board's decision. In his opinion, there are personalities that cannot be changed, and Arthur Bohr is one of them. He has a 20-year history of legal conflicts, including incidents with women. Dale describes him as someone who has a deep aversion to women and wants to harm them. The history of this man shows his drive for self-assertion and the need to feel important. Investigators suspect that his actions could be a kind of revenge. The investigation takes an unexpected turn when it emerges that on the day of Amy Willard's disappearance, the local police stop a vagrant for a conversation. This happens only a few blocks from the place where traces of the incident are later found. This arouses the investigators' interest, and they begin to search for this man for further explanations. But finding him proves to be difficult. 1 year after the incident with Amy Willard, a car theft occurs in the city. According to the description of the injured party, the suspect is a certain Arthur Bondar, who had already come into conflict with the law. But finding him does not succeed. Shortly thereafter, another woman reports an attempted break-in to her apartment on the 3rd floor. The arrested person calls himself Peter Thomas Love. Keys to a Honda standing nearby are found on him. A check shows that the license plate is registered in the name of Arthur Bohr and belongs to a Ford from 1993. Further investigations reveal that Peter Thomas Love is a false name, and it is actually Arthur Omar. The question arises, why is Omar's license plate on the Honda and not on his Ford? The answer is disturbing. The car was illegally taken over. It belongs to Mary Owens, a 25-year-old resident of the city whose disappearance was reported by her relatives 3 months ago. That morning, Mary was supposed to come to work, but she does not show up. The case of Mary Owens raises many questions for the police. They believe that something happened to the girl during her drive on Highway 476, the same highway where the incident with Amy Willard previously took place. An interesting fact. In the trunk of Mary's car, they find traces that resemble dried liquid, and on the front seat there is a small animal. Light scratches can be seen on both bumpers of the vehicle, which resemble the damage to Emmy's car. Arthur Omar immediately draws the investigators' attention since Mary has disappeared. Now they seriously consider his possible involvement in the incident with Emmy. When he is invited for a conversation, he says, "I am ready to tell everything that interests you, but I ask not to show me on television. After all, no official charges have been brought against me." Arthur Omar claims that on the evening of Emmy's disappearance, he was at a birthday party and not in a bar. According to him, he spends time with his family, although it is later discovered that this is a woman with a child whom he meets. However, a bar employee contradicts this and states that she saw him at the Smoky Joe on the same night. 1 year after the incident with her daughter, Gail Willard, who works as a rescue nurse, asks to see the photos of Emmy's injuries. After examining the image of what the official agencies call a pattern, she expresses a different opinion. In her opinion, the trace is uneven and resembles an imprint. After receiving this information, the police immediately begin searching for the Ford, the vehicle that Arthur was driving during Emmy's disappearance. However, the results of the search are disappointing. Investigators show persistence and follow the path of the tow truck. By contacting the corresponding company, they find out the location of the vehicle of interest. Arriving at the indicated location, the law enforcement agencies discover a green Ford that had been standing in a field next to the towing company's equipment for almost a year. This discovery represents a potentially important clue that had not yet been subjected to thorough investigation. During the external inspection of the vehicle, slight damage to the front bumper is noted. Particular attention is drawn to a tire, a 13-inch Firestone 440. This detail proves to be extremely important, as it matches the imprint previously found at the crime scene. An expert on hidden traces from a specialized facility confirms the match not only of the tire's brand, model, and size, but also of the degree of wear. Despite the fact that the car stood outside without a roof for a long time, which can complicate the search for clues, the investigators do not lose hope. An interesting fact is that the man connected to the case previously worked in an operating room where he could have learned thorough cleaning methods. Since no new leads were found during the first inspection, the officers decide to proceed more thoroughly. According to Alan Stewart, a police officer from Pennsylvania, they literally dismantle the vehicle into individual parts. They remove the seats, the carpeting, and thoroughly vacuum the interior. When dismantling the door panel, small traces of biological material are found. A laboratory analysis confirms that the traces found on the passenger door belong to Amy Willard. But the biggest surprise awaits the investigators when the car is lifted for towing. The sunlight falling on the lower part of the vehicle highlights something unusual on the oil pan. The story of Amy Willard and the mysterious events surrounding her attract the attention of law enforcement agencies. Everything begins in the bar Smoky Joe where Arthur Omar, according to investigators, first notices the girl. It is assumed that he then follows her on Highway 476 as she drives home. The investigation uncovers a series of strange coincidences. Similar damage is found on the bumpers of two cars, as if they had collided with each other. Experts pay attention to unusual traces at the crime scene, which in their opinion could come from Firestone tires similar to those on Omar's car. The forensic examination reveals a series of puzzling details. Strange markings are found on Amy, the nature of which raises many questions. However, an expert from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology does not confirm the connection between these markings and some evidence found at the crime scene. The most convincing evidence is the results of the DNA analysis. Biological traces found at the crime scene match Arthur Omar's DNA profile, which represents a turning point in the investigation. Shortly before the court proceedings, there is another unexpected discovery. In neighboring Bucks County, Pennsylvania, remains are found that presumably belong to Mary Owens. Interestingly, Omar is found at his arrest behind the wheel of a car that belongs to Owens. The discovery site of the remains is located less than 30 kilometers from Omar's house and 48 kilometers from the place where Amy was last seen. Mary's fate resembles the story of Amy. During the court proceedings, Omar's lawyers try to explain his behavior with a difficult childhood and developmental disorders. During the course of the trial, tense situations frequently occur that require the intervention of security services due to emotional outbursts outside the courtroom. The relatives of the accused openly express their dissatisfaction with the media coverage. His half-brother and his mother get into conflicts with the journalists reporting on the trial. Finally, the court imposes a strict sentence against Arthur for his actions. Omar's reaction to the verdict is shocking. He turns to Amy's mother and shows inappropriate gestures. His words to Mrs. Willard and her children cause serious concern. After the conclusion of the case, prosecutor Patrick Meehan describes Arthur as an extremely dangerous individual and notes that in his career, he has never met anyone so ruthless and cold-blooded. Gail Willard, Amy's mother, expresses the opinion that Arthur does not deserve public attention and calls him an extremely unpleasant person. It is remarkable what an important role scientific methods played in the investigation. Without DNA analysis and other material evidence, it would have been much more difficult for law enforcement agencies to achieve results in this difficult case.